Hmm. Oh. Yes.
Okay, I have started recording so that we can have an easier time getting this up to YouTube. So for the folks watching on YouTube, I'm typing up a couple predictions. We're going to be watching through the C-SPAN restream. I couldn't get the CBS site to cooperate, so this is how we're rolling. All right. What else is going to come up? What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about probably the situation in Israel and or Lebanon because we've done a whole bunch of stuff. So for those who don't know, got Israel performing this phone bombing attack and a subsequent missile strike where they've killed the leader of Hezbollah um, in an escalation of conflict. So Israel is doing a lot. Yeah, doing zero fact checking is interesting. It's going to be a problem. When I say interesting, I mean it's interesting in terms of how Tim Walz is tactically going to adjust. Um, we knew Vance was going to lie. That was going to happen either way. Um, so Walls will have to choose strategically about how he's going to deal with those lies. And I think his best response is to be as demeaning as possible. He has to treat it like an absolute teacher and just go in just super derisive on it. I think is his best play. Yeah, it's just placating Republicans. Republicans are still going to complain. Republicans will complain about bias in the questions because the questions have to address, hey, why do you lie all the time about everything? Or like one of the questions probably going to be on FBI crime statistics. If the moderator's doing a good job, they will ask why Republicans keep saying that crime is up when in fact crime is down. Yeah, they'll say Walls seemed really familiar with those questions because Walls' team probably did what I'm doing right now. What questions do you think you're going to be asked? Gee golly, do you think you're going to be asked about the border and abortion during the debate? You should probably be prepared for that. Do you think you're going to be asked about your economic plan? This is really normal stuff. I think Walls is probably going to talk about school lunches. He might talk about IVF. These have been big things for him. Yep, it's the same questions every time. It's going to be the same questions that were asked before. The only things that are going to be asked that are different are going to be these current events questions related to floods, the climate, Israel, Lebanon, possibly the FBI crime statistics. This is very topical. I like it a lot when they ask questions about what's happened in the last week because I pay attention to everything. I had to I had to allow that through the moderator. That's okay. We we allow people to talk about butt plugs here. That's fine. I'm not that much of a square. Okay. Let a couple people know. Uh, uh, that's a politics chat. They're already going to be watching somebody. Like I do not go into the self promotion channel for a political streamer to promote my political stream. That is bad. Let's see who else is hanging. So I post that there. This spot gets notifications from me automatically. This one, we go over here. Yeah. Come down here. Get this posted. Post one up here. Where is that? It's over here. That up. Uh, I'll post one in here for Demos. A reaction. And I already let folks in the Stormflux chat know. Should be good. Oh, one here. Okay. That should be everywhere where I regularly talk to people. Cool. All right, got about another 4 minutes. Let's see. So I think we'll hear something really stupid from Vance on this. I don't think he can help himself. On the border, probably just going to hear some lies from the right, same as always. I don't know necessarily if Walls will have a lot to say about that, but there are a lot of good things he could say about this. Like to hear Walls say something about immigrant neighbors. I'd like to hear him say that immigrants pay taxes. Not enough people, like, the average American does not actually know and understand. Immigrants are an enormous tax base. Letting immigrants in is a really good deal for taxpayers. We could provide more services to immigrants and still make bank. Because undocumented immigrants, especially, undocumented immigrants get no benefits for taxes, but they still work jobs that tend to have tax withholding. Most undocumented immigrants pay income tax. I think a lot of Americans do not know that. And it's very important. Let's see. So I'd love it if they talked about that. I really hope the moderators bring up the Springfield lies. I'd really like to see the moderators bring up the floods, because so if they bring up the floods, Vance's move is to pivot to we brought in RFK. People seem to like what RFK says about the climate. I think what RFK says about the climate is undermined by RFK joining the right. It would be pretty great if they asked, what's a tariff? But I've never heard Vance spout the tariff stuff that Donald Trump is giving. So I think Vance is smarter than Trump, but Trump is more charismatic. And Walz is very charismatic. So the last debate was very difficult for the Democrats to lose. So it's difficult for Democrats to lose a debate to Trump because he's just a friggin' moron. He's a moron. He's easy to bait. He's easy to bait. You can run him off the rails. Not necessarily easy to debate, but he's easy to bait. Vance, I presume, will be easy to debate because the man has all the charisma of, like, a popsicle stick on the side of the road. Like, all I can think of, making a metaphor of it, or making a simile of J.D. Vance's charisma is not even exciting. Because I have to think of the most boring possible concept to set up the metaphor. That's not intellectually engaging. Yeah. I've played Dungeons and Dragons orcs with more charisma than JD Vance. That's probably a simple way of saying it. Yep. So I think that this should be up now if I refresh, right? Okay, here we go.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
Do I want to maximize this?
Ready to continue to build the future together.
So I want to have my notes on screen while this is playing, so I'm not going to maximize it, but I will
You know what's at the end of this little journey?
move my notes a bit.
Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
and I want
This is a CBS News special, live
notes
from
take up
CBS
about
News
this
headquarters
much
in
space
New
on
York.
the stream.
America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Maybe
Good
what I
evening,
do
I'm
is
Nora O'Donnell, and
shift
thank you
this.
for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks
Okay,
here in the
so
U.S. and around the world.
maybe
We
what
have
I
a
need
consequential
is
night
a
ahead, and
browser
our
window
focus is
that's
the issues
targeting
that
this.
matter to you, the voter. Let's
I
introduce
fill
the
that
candidates.
off into
Minnesota's
this.
Democratic Governor Tim Walz and
And then I
Ohio's
need
Republican
a
Senator J.D. Vance tonight,
application
meeting for
capture
the first
window.
time.
Go capture.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to
That
have
is
a
hitting
thoughtful and civil debate,
Notepad.
these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one
then
candidate
just
who will
shove
have
that
2
over
minutes to
here.
respond. The other candidate will be
And now I
allowed
can
2 minutes
control
for
this with a bit more
rebuttal. Then
granularity.
each
So
candidate will get another minute to make
this
further
one,
points, with an additional
kind of
1 minute
here.
each at the discretion of the moderator.
Expand
The
that a bit.
primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves
we
the
can
right to
possibly
mute the
make
candidates' microphones to maintain decorum.
chat a little
We have
bigger
not shared the
for
questions
this.
or topics with the campaigns.
y'all can hang out a bit
The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
Okay.
Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises.
Now I
The
can
Middle
kinda
East
move
is
this
on the
around.
brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack
little bit of
failed.
talk about the Iran
thanks
attack.
to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than
How's this gonna be framed?
40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war.
Okay.
Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced.
please let me know if
time
the
it would
audio
take to develop a
is
nuclear
lacking at
weapon.
any
It is
point in
down
time.
now to 1 or 2
Because
weeks' time.
I'm just letting this go, and
Governor
we'll hope the
Walz,
audio is about
if
right.
you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home
a
tonight.
weird question.
Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our
Expansion of
coalition,
Israel?
able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that.
He's missed
It's
the
those that
mark
were
on giving a
closest to
clear
Donald
answer.
Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff,
He
John
should have said,
Kelly,
"No, we don't
said that he
support
was the
making
most
a
flawed
preemptive
human being
strike."
he'd ever met. And both of
The thumb
his
from Spike
secretaries of
is-
defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person
That's a good line.
closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris,
That's
is we've
something
seen steady
worth
leadership.
saying, but I think he
We've
might
seen
have
a
rushed to
calmness
say it.
that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our
Yeah,
allies
that's a
see
good oh, yeah,
Donald
I missed
Trump
that in my
turn towards
in my
Vladimir Putin,
predictions.
turn towards North Korea. When we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as
there.
the vice president said today we will protect our forces.
I
and
don't
our
know too
allied
much about the
forces,
dock
and there
worker
will be
strike yet.
consequences.
I think a lot of people have been rushing
Governor,
to weigh
your
in on
time
it.
is up. Senator Vance, the same question.
I've heard a lot
Would
of
you
people
support
like throwing
or
shade
oppose a
at the
preemptive
strike leader. I
by
don't
Israel
know the
on
details.
Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question.
Yeah, I think that is
First of all,
showing.
thanks,
It's a bit of a
Governor.
shaky
Thanks
answer.
to CBS for hosting the debate, and thanks most importantly to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to
Just
pay
do
attention to this
W&B,
vice
save me
presidential
some
debate.
space here.
I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk
First
of my
thing
early
he went
life.
to is,
I went
I'm
to
working
college
class.
on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White
That
House,
is an opening
the
statement.
American dream is going to be attainable once again.
That's a solid opening
Now, to
statement.
answer
What's
this
your answer to the
particular
question?
We have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective
And it's a lie.
deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line.
Lies about
Iran, which launched this attack, has received over
as
$100 billion
deterrence.
in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching
DT
against their
left
allies,
Iran
and God forbid, potentially launching against the United
deal.
States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They
There
needed
is
to
a graph
recognize
to
that if
demonstrate
they got
this.
out of
I was
line,
looking at the
the
graph
United
just earlier
States
today.
global leadership would put
Saw it posted on
stability and
Threads.
peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question.
Preemptive
Look,
strike.
It is up to Israel what they think they need
Says
to
it's
do to
up to
keep their
Israel.
country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel
Walz
question.
should cut back on this and say a
Thank you,
preemptive strike is
Senator.
never
Governor
acceptable.
Walz, do you care to respond to any of the
Yeah.
allegations?
Get yourself
Well, look, Donald Trump was
something.
in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches.
Yep,
Look, our
that
allies
happened.
understand
We had 100
that
people
Donald
injured in an
Trump
Iran
is
missile
fickle.
strike
He
on
will go to
a
whoever
base.
has the most
It's
flattery
not a
or
strong
where it makes
response
sense
on
to
it.
him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today,
He's
like you witnessed
his
in
debate
April.
prep
Both Iranian
for
attacks were repelled.
this response
Our coalition
was
is
good.
strong, and we need the steady leadership that
He's
Kamala
hitting this
Harris is
more
providing.
confidently than he hit his own
Senator
answer
Vance,
earlier.
The U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that
Back to
deal.
Vance.
He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake?
That's
You
a
have
good
1 minute.
question.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame
Nuclear.
Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made
That's a weird
the world
point to say,
more
like,
secure. Now, we talk about what
Harris
the sequence of events
hasn't fixed
that
enough
led
of
us to
Trump's
where we are right
mistakes.
now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets,
Walz giving
but
the look.
effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home.
NBC points.
When was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out?
Hey,
The
Lane,
only
thanks for
answer
the
is during the
subscription.
4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Appreciate you.
Gentlemen, we have a lot
If
to
anybody
get to.
else
Nora?
is
Barbara,
holding
thank
on
you.
to those
Let's turn now
Bezos
to
bucks,
Hurricane Helene.
I'd certainly
The storm
appreciate your
could
patronage.
become one of
We're going
the
to try and get a
deadliest
couple
on
fun,
record.
loosely
More than
spooky things going in October.
160 people
And I'd
are
like to
dead,
do
and
more
hundreds
politics
more
talk.
are missing.
So if anybody has
Scientists
political
say
videos
climate
that you'd like
change
me
makes
to
these
review,
hurricanes larger,
well, if
stronger,
you're doing
and
the
more
Prime
deadly
subs,
because
the
of
Prime
the
sub
historic
never
rainfall.
auto renews. It has to be
Senator
manually entered
Vance,
every month.
according to CBS News polling,
We're getting into
7 in
hurricanes.
10
All
Americans
right.
and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change?
You're going to
I'll give
Vance
you 2
first.
minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph
Reasonable.
of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old
I
child.
saw that
and
photo,
it was the
too.
last
That
photograph
was
ever
very
taken of
sad.
them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and
Funny
we want
thing,
as robust
Vance
and aggressive as a federal
is
response as we can
capable of
get
being more
to
of a human
save as
being
many
than Trump
lives as
is.
possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally.
But he's a
in
Republican.
Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I
describes
support clean air, clean water.
Trump.
We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate
Goes
change.
to carbon
Let's just say
emissions.
that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true.
Is at least good
If you
pretending to be
believe
human.
that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as
There
much
was this
American
restaurant thing
manufacturing as
recently
possible,
in
and you'd want to
Pennsylvania,
produce as much
and
energy
Vance,
as
in the
possible
moment,
United
on
States of
site,
America, because
actually
we're the
handled it like a
cleanest
human
economy
being.
in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some
Okay,
of the dirtiest
goes
parts of the
to
entire world. And when I
carbon,
say that, I mean the amount of
talks
carbon emissions
about
they're doing per unit of
Paris,
economic output.
China.
So if we actually care about
I think this
getting
plays
cleaner
well
air
to
and
his
cleaner
base.
water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Walz,
You're
you
not
have
going
2
to,
minutes to
that point's not
respond.
going to
We
hold
got
up.
close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this
That's an
hurricane,
opening.
and my heart goes
Let's
out
see
to
how
the folks
Walz
that
can
are
take
down there.
advantage of it.
In contact with the governors, I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're
Governorship
staying there,
is a
staying
good
focused.
point there.
Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more
Gives
beachfront
Vance
property to be able to invest in.
credit
What we've seen
for
out of the Harris administration now,
recognizing
the
climate
Biden-Harris
change.
administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen
Falls
massive
out from.
investments, the biggest in
Good move.
global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act has created
Collaboration
jobs all across the country.
confers
Thank you very
advantage.
much.
Ohio,
Okay,
taking
finally,
technology that
the
we invented
notification
and
played
making it
correctly
here.
for that one,
200,000 jobs
but it didn't
across
play
the
correctly for
country.
the other ones.
Largest solar
Maybe the
manufacturing
notification
plant
only
in North
catches
America
new
sits in
subs,
Minnesota. My
but
farmers
maybe
know
it's
climate
not
change is real.
catching
They've seen 500-year
renewals.
droughts, 500-year floods.
That-
back to
that
back.
that tells
But
me what the
they're
problem
doing is
might be.
adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me.
Anyway, thank you,
"Look, I
Alaric, for the
harvest
sub.
corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind." We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So
See,
the
Vance
solution
is willing
for
to look
us
at Walz.
is to continue to move forward. That climate
Already
change
doing better
is
than
real.
Trump.
Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower
Hey,
for
Chad.
the
Glad to
future,
have you.
not just the current. And that's what absolutely
recognized
makes sense. And then we
the
start
pseudonym,
thinking about
but I
how
couldn't
do we
place it
mitigate
exactly.
these disasters.
Like I've heard that
Thank
name
you.
before.
Senator, I
Don't
want to
remember
give you an
where.
opportunity
Glad
to
to have you.
respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't
He
believe
ignored
her
the
rhetoric on
actual
this.
question.
If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important
What
to
do you mean
touch upon,
Trump's
because
energy
when we
policies?
talk about clean energy, I think
Out of
that's a
nowhere.
slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of
We
America.
have invested in
Some of them are
so much
a
of
lot
that
of them
here.
are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by
your
the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to
That
respond?
is like a lot of
Well,
lies
look,
in
we're,
one.
we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we
This
make
is a
sure
good
that we're
pivot.
protecting by
Don't
burying our
engage with
power
the
lines?
lies,
How do we
move
make
on.
sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want.
This is a good pivot.
We can be smarter about that, and an all
You do
about
not
energy
dwell
policy is
on
exactly
lies.
what
You don't
she's doing,
spend all your time
creating those
debunking
jobs
lies
right
and
here.
saying no, no, no.
Governor, your time
You
is
go
up.
on
The
to
overwhelming
like, hey, we were
consensus among
talking about the
scientists is that
hurricanes.
The Earth's climate is
We have
warming
more
at
to
an
say about the
unprecedented
hurricanes.
rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top
This is
issues
question
for
3. I missed a
American
question.
voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest
Vance
mass
first.
deportation plan in
2
American
questions in a
history
row.
and to use the U.S. military to
So it
do
was
so.
Israel
Could
was
you be more
Q1,
specific about exactly how this will work?
Q2.
For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their
2.
children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So
Vance,
first of all,
would you
Margaret, before we talk
deport
about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our
This
system.
is the correct
That
tactic
has
for him to
opened
take,
the
but he's not
floodgates. And
answering
what
the
it's meant
question.
is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding.
The
You've got
vast
to
majority of
re-implement Donald
fentanyl
Trump's
enters through
border
legal
policies,
ports.
build the wall, re-implement deportations, and that gets me to your point, Margaret, about
Said
what do we actually
re-implement
do? So we've got
deportations
20,
as if we
25
stop.
million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those
We did
people
not
have committed some
de-implement
form of crime in
deportations.
addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it
Yeah,
harder
fentanyl
for
comes in
illegal aliens to
through,
undercut
like,
the wages
seaports
of American
mostly.
workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work.
Minimum wage is
And
not
the
fair
final point,
wage.
Margaret, is you
We're
asked
way
about
behind on that.
family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret,
Okay, he
we have
finally came back to family separation.
320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some
During
of them
Trump.
hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember
Okay.
when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good
That's
for
pretty
all of us.
baseless. It's just like empty
Governor,
rhetoric.
Do you care to respond to
How
any of the
is Walz gonna
specific
deal with this?
allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the
quick thing.
opioid
Yep.
crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational
good
gangs
point.
for human trafficking and drug interventions.
I don't really care about
But
that
look,
point in
we all
particular.
wanna
That
solve
she
this.
was a prosecutor.
Most of us want to
Cool.
solve this.
I don't think
and
it's a huge
that is
bona
the
fide.
United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents.
Requires
That's the Chamber
Congress.
of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's
That is
why
true.
we had the fairest
cannot
and
wave a
the
wand over
toughest
this.
bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was
Pretty
crafted
much,
by
yeah.
a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the
Talks
Chamber of
about
Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris
Border
helped
bill,
get there.
that Trump
1,500
bill.
new border agents.
This makes
Detection
sense to
for
talk
drugs.
about.
DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on
He
this.
didn't
just
do
what
the thing
America
about
wants.
legal ports, but I
as
think that's
soon as I was
fine
getting
because
ready
that's
to
a
pass and
nitpick
actually
that, like,
tackle this,
I know.
Donald Trump
I don't
said
think that's
no.
the most
Told
effective
them to
thing
vote
to
against it
say.
because it
Saying
gives
that
him a
we've
campaign
acted on the
issue. It
opioid
gives him
crisis
to-
is a
what would
better
Donald
response
Trump
than what
talk
I
about
would
if
have
we
done.
actually did some of these things, and they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald
He's
Trump had
correct
4
about
years.
that, but I
He
don't
had
think it
4
plays
years
well
to
with
do
the
this,
base.
and he
Like,
promised
I don't
you,
think
America,
voters
how easy it
accept
would
that
be.
answer, no matter
I'll
how
build you
true
a
it
big,
is.
beautiful wall,
And the
and
right
Mexico will pay
really
for it.
depends on them not
Less than
accepting
2%
that.
of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came
Walz
down
is
that
showing
escalator,
really good energy at this point.
dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at
Dehumanizing
one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal
She
crossings.
did undo
we had
that
a record number of
because
fentanyl coming
there
into
was
our
an-
country.
there was a family
And
separation
now that
policy.
she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she
religion?
became the vice president, when she became
even
the
coming from?
appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive
opening the
problems
border.
in
It's
the
not
United States of
correct.
America. Parents who can't
One of
afford
those things was
healthcare,
actually,
schools that are
like,
overwhelmed.
ended
It's
because
got to
they
stop,
weren't
and
in
it
the
will
COVID
when
crisis
Donald Trump is
anymore. They couldn't
president
do that.
again.
Senator, your time
Yeah, I don't know
is
where
up.
that came
Governor,
from. That got religion
What
line?
about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said,
Vance's face
it's
like
not
on
true. Don't do it. There's consequences
This is
to
a
this.
good
There's
pivot.
consequences. We could come together. Senator Lankford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue
guess
to make it an issue. And the consequences in
it's an
Springfield
absolute,
were
like,
the
food for the
governor had to
baseline.
send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this? Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support
This is a good,
many of the changes
focus
that you would
by the
actually
moderator.
want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala
what do you
Harris
mean?
has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job.
They
Of
want
course,
more
additional
money.
resources would help. But most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering
They want
our law
more
enforcement
people.
to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this
Parentheses is
country,
me.
you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed.
Quick civics
You've
lesson.
got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of
So,
illegal immigrants to
Vance
compete with
supports
Americans for scarce homes. The
remain
people
in
that I'm most
Mexico.
worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by
Says
Kamala Harris's
homes are
open border.
scarce.
It is a disgrace, Tim. And I
Homes
actually
were
think,
cheap
I agree
in
with you. I
Springfield,
think you
Ohio
guys solve
for a
this
reason.
problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up.
Defense
Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah,
Is
well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the
Law
ones that supported it.
enforcement
That's
asked for the
because they
bill.
know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring
That's
this
a
up,
good- that's a
of
good
not
response.
dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply
That's going
want
to play
order to
really
it.
well.
This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who
That's
do it. And it
good.
lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And
I
just
think that is gonna go
clarify
over
for
very
our
well
viewers,
with a lot of
Springfield,
people.
Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected
Well,
status.
Margaret,
Nora?
but
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
Thank you,
I think it's
Nora.
important
We're
because
gonna turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys
economy,
weren't going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand.
I feel like
That is not
Walz
a
is
person coming
rightly
in, applying for a
pissed.
green card and waiting for 10 years.
Like
Thank you,
he just
Senator.
had that
Implementation of
stock
illegal
still
immigration,
like
Margaret.
that's what I look
Thank you,
like when I
Senator,
get
for
killed by a Dark
describing the
Souls
legal
boss.
process.
Those laws-
We
and
have
Kamala
so much
Harris
to get
opened up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much.
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora?
Thank you, Margaret. The economy
Oh,
is
boy.
a top concern
Wow.
for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic
They should have
plan,
cut
so let's
Vance's
talk about
mic
the specifics.
earlier.
Governor Walz, Vice
should
President
not have let him
Harris
get that
unveiled
response
a plan
out.
that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things.
He's not
that
answering
there's
how it's going to be
fairness in
paid
that.
for,
Look, the
but
$35
he shouldn't.
insulin is a good thing.
The question
but
of
it
like,
costs
how are you going to pay
$5
for
make
this
insulin.
is
They were
like,
charging $800 before this law went
it's a
into
false
effect.
equivalence
As
question.
far as the
America
housing
can pay
goes,
for
I've
everything.
seen it in
America can
Minnesota,
pay for anything.
12% more
The
housing in
correct answer
Minneapolis,
is we're going to
prices
tax the
went down
wealthy.
on rent 4%. It's
But
worth
that's
it.
not like
And
a
then
fun
making
answer.
Sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota. Reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession.
This is the best way to answer the question.
Look, this is simple for you.
The question
Where are we
was
going?
dumb.
Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our
says
system
pay
works
their
best.
fair share.
More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan.
You promised not
and
to
says
fact
it
check
would
me.
increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you.
Vance won't be
How do you pay
distracted and
for
go
all
to the
that
last
without
thing.
ballooning
He's
the
harder to
deficit?
get off
I'll give you
topic
2 minutes.
than Trump is.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies.
Already
and what she's actually
done
done
this as
instead
VP.
is drive the cost of food higher by 25%. Drive the cost of housing higher by about
Blames
60%.
Harris
Open the
for
American southern border
inflation.
and make middle-class life unaffordable
Okay,
for a
so it's
large
just like
number
whatever.
of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans
It's the
for how
kind
to
of attack
address
line that they've
middle-class
been using
problems,
for a
then
while.
she
It's
ought
kind of
to
an
do
expected
them
one.
now.
I'm
Not when
wondering
asking for
what Walz
promotion,
will
but
say
in the
about
job
this.
the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about
I feel like the
how
answer
much
here
you can
is
trust
you need
her
to give
actual
Democrats
plans. Now,
Congress.
Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's
Trump does not
economic
actually
plan
have any
doesn't
policies.
make sense,
We
I
know
say
that.
look at the record. He delivered rising
But this has
take-home pay
been
for American
a
workers.
kind of winning
Now, Tim
line for
admirably
Republicans.
admits that they
People
want to
have this
undo the
impression
Trump tax
because they
cuts, but
got
if you look
into
at
the
what was
Trump
so
era,
different about
and the
Donald
start
Trump's
of the
tax
Trump
cuts,
era
even
was
from
fine.
previous Republican tax cut
Because,
plans,
you know, it
is
was
that
preceded
a lot
by
of those resources
Obama.
went
It
to
can't be
giving
bad.
more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can
So he's
afford
talking
to
about the
live
2017
American
tax
dream
cuts
again.
that were
I
all
know
for the
a lot of you are
wealthy.
struggling.
So,
I know a lot of you are worried
like-
about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
That's just a shell
Governor, do you
game.
want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle
Yeah,
class?
well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.
His way
not
of
Donald
phrasing
Trump. And
that
the same
was
thing goes with this.
weird.
And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, in the last year as president?
That's a weird
what's wrong
pivot.
with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less
Refers
self-reliant, less
to
productive in our
Bad
own nation that it would somehow make us
neolib
better off, and they
policies
were wrong
from the
about it. And for the
90s.
first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so
happen.
many of
That's
the
a
drugs, the
gaslight.
pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that
This
were
is
willing
very
to ship
correct.
it over.
It's a
and we
good
saw
way to
people
target and
profit.
reframe it. I
Folks
like that he mentioned the
folks
trade
that
war.
Are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a
show
gross
that he
generalization.
did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump
You gotta
didn't
play
deliver
whack-a-mole because it's
rising
a gish
take-home
gallop.
pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did, and then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic
not a
record,
gish gallop
which has
because
made
it's a bunch
gas,
of,
groceries and housing unaffordable
is it
for
a gish
American
gallop?
citizens.
That might be
I
accurate.
was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to
And you
not
reject
be able to
Medicare
afford
for
the
all.
things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen,
This is
on
question
many topics.
5
but
now?
right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the
Qualifications.
president hears before making consequential decisions.
This sounds like an
we
empty
want to ask you
air
about your
kind of
leadership
question.
qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989.
I didn't know that.
But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy? You have 2
Yeah,
minutes.
well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural
I don't know how to spell
Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service.
like
I
this.
joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms.
I don't know how
and
it's
then
spelled.
I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills
He's
that we
pivoting
got done,
around a lot.
working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning.
didn't get whether or not
to
he
make
was
sure
actually
that I'm
there
there
on
for
the day.
people, to make sure that I get
But I
this
don't know
right.
what the
I will
original
say
claim
more than
is
anything.
about the trip.
Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there,
Funniest
the
thing is,
impact it made, the
this is a
difference it
very
made in my life. I
unnecessary
learned a lot about
question
China. I
by
hear the critiques of this.
the
I would
moderators,
make the case that Donald
and
Trump should have come on one of those
Republicans
trips
are
with
still
us.
going to complain
I guarantee you he wouldn't
about
be,
what was not even a
praising Xi
minor fact
Jinping
check earlier.
about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade
Wasn't-
war that he
didn't
ends up
even
losing.
rise to the level
so
of a
this
fact
is
check.
about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at,
It's insane that
or whether it
they
was being
keep
a good soldier,
pointing
or
to
it was
like
being a good
Kamala
member of
Harris is
Congress,
empowering
those are the
China.
things that I
They're
think are
like
the values
producing
that people
solar
care
panels in
about.
China when like Trump has
Governor,
been the
just to
friendliest
follow up on
dude
that, the
to Xi
question was,
Jinping that
can
we've
you
seen.
explain the
No, just
discrepancy?
all I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments.
These
and explained you
moderators
then
are
voted
actually
for Donald Trump in
playing pretty
2020.
fair.
But the Washington Post
the
reported
most
new
part.
messages last week in which you
So
also
the Republicans will be
disparaged
super
Trump's
mad.
economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most
This is the right
importantly,
answer
Donald
for him
Trump
to give.
delivered for the American people. Rising wages,
Because he's
rising
able to
take-home
say
pay,
that he's
an
wrong.
economy that
Because
works
Trump
for normal
can't say that
Americans,
Trump
a
is
secure
wrong.
southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages.
I feel like
from
they both
2020.
come out pretty
Margaret,
equal
I've
in
been
this
extremely
question because they're
consistent
both
that
admitting
I think
fault.
there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator, that Congress is not just a high-class
You're
debating
in
society. It's not just a
Congress.
forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were
That's
a lot of
you,
things
though.
on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular.
You're a senator.
Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're not, probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the
Thing
Biden
is, you
administration.
can't just
it's
remove
the one
tariffs,
issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe
because
Biden's
you get
record.
no promise
Think about
that
this. If you're
you get
trying
no
to
promise that
employ
the matching
slave
tariffs from
laborers in
China
China at
will
$3
be
a day,
removed.
you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands
And Biden
up for
didn't
itself
use
and says,
blanket
"You're not
tariffs on
accessing our
everything.
markets unless
He
you're
used
paying
targeted
middle-class
tariffs
Americans a fair wage."
about specific
Senator, your
components,
time is
things
up.
related to vehicle
Nora?
manufacture.
Thank you. Now to the issue
Because
of reproductive rights.
we need to build
Governor
cars.
Walz, after
Too many
Roe
people in our
versus
country
Wade
build
was
cars. We need to
overturned,
keep building
you
cars,
signed a bill into law
or
that made
our economy's
Minnesota
gonna
one
fall
of the
apart.
least restrictive states in the nation
We are
when
a
it
car
comes
country.
to
It's
abortion.
our thing,
Former
unfortunately.
President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th
Six.
month is absolutely fine.
Abortion.
Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children.
So he covered one of the
Or
people
in Kentucky,
who
Kathleen
survived,
Duval,
who's been
a
with them on the
12-year-old
campaign.
child, raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance
He's not
said,
mentioning
"Two wrongs don't
the
make a
women
right."
in
There is
Georgia
no
who
right
have died.
in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there
This
listening,
should
me
be
included,
Vance's
infertility
weakest
treatments are
issue
why I have a child.
in terms of the
That's
public
nobody
sentiment.
else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
I think it's
Senator,
been
do you
like
want to respond to the
it's
governor's
been an
claim? Will you
insane
create
jump
a federal
of
pregnancy
maternal
monitoring
mortality in
agency?
Texas. It's like
No, Nora,
30 or
certainly we
60% or
won't.
something.
And I want to talk about this issue.
I'm gonna
'cause I
look it
know
up later.
A lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said.
anybody
on this
wants-
topic.
if anybody in the chat wants to look that
I
up
grew
real
up
quick.
in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel
What
like they
is
didn't have any other
Vance's
options.
answer on this?
And you know, one of them is actually very dear to me, and I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the
Are you gonna
fullest sense of the
answer the
word. I want us to
question?
support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so
He
much
says
that we
fertility
can do
treatment, but not
on the
IVF.
public policy
IVF
front
is not
just to give women
fertility
more
treatment.
options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the
Not
abortion
really.
policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the
like
proper
he's gonna
way to handle
defend,
this, as messy as democracy
having these
sometimes
different states.
is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like
Did
to
not
respond
answer the question
and also
at
answer
all.
the
That's
question about restrictions?
that should have been an
Yeah,
easy
well,
no.
The question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of
Oh,
that,
he's
she
hidden
had to
now.
travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it,
I don't
you
wanna
hear us
think
talking
about this
exactly the same.
anymore.
Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned,
Felt
was,
my
I
blood
think,
go
referring to a
cold.
national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had
like
a
a method
referendum
thing.
in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that,
That's
Nora,
funny.
is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible.
first
because
time
we've gotta
any
do a
Republican
better
has
job
talked
at that,
about
and that's what
childcare
real
ever.
leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3
That's a
state
good record to bring
for
up.
the best place to
I'd
raise
have to look
children.
up where they
But
rank.
these two things to try and say that we're pro-children,
It would be
but
better
we
if
don't
he
like
said
this, or you guys
the
are
rank
pro-abortion.
instead
That's
of
not the
saying
case at
they
all.
have one of the
We are
best
pro-freedoms
ranks.
for women to make their choices, and we're going,
Vance
and
looks
Kamala
troubled.
Harris is making the case to make
What does
options for
Vance
children
wanna
more
say
affordable,
here?
a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like
that's
Amber
weird.
Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that
Maybe
she
you should
was.
stop being Republican
And
then.
maybe
Fucking
you're
ghoul.
free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because
Yes.
Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience.
you honestly should
and
not
make
have,
the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please,
You should not have
Yes, Governor,
a
please
like
respond.
Look, this is
natal
one where
care
there's
facility
always
that's
something that
unwilling
this
to
is a
perform
very
an
simple
abortion.
proposition. These are women's decisions to make
because
about their health care
there
decisions.
are
and the
tons of cases
physicians
where that
who
is
know
medically
best when they
necessary.
need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
what was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That
We need to go
doesn't
further than
preclude
Roe v.
us
Wade.
from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Okay, yeah, so there's probably the biggest lie we're gonna hit out of this, out of a couple. I note Walls has the very correct point in that Vance is talking about a lot of stuff that the Republicans have no plan
The
to
House
do.
will be in order.
He's talking about
This year, C-SPAN
Republicans, we're gonna
celebrates
earn
45
back
years of
trust, we're gonna
covering
support
Congress like
families,
no
we're gonna do
other.
this and that. That stuff
Since
is in the
1979,
Democratic
we've been
platform.
your
It's not in
primary
the
source for
Republican
Capitol
platform.
Hill, providing
So
balanced,
Vance is just kind of
unfiltered coverage of
inventing a
government,
position.
taking you to where the policy's debated and decided, all with the support of America's
So
cable
it's
companies.
like Walls
C-SPAN,
was in the position of
45
arguing against a
years and
phantom.
counting.
because
Powered
it's
by
just like
cable.
it's just this entirely fake proposition. It's not actually
Friday
proposed.
nights. Watch C-SPAN's 2024.
So we're through the
campaign
first
trail,
hour. I'm assuming that
weekly
this is a
discussion
90-minute
on how
one,
the
similar to
presidential,
last.
Senate, and House campaigns
Yeah, it's tough.
have
It's
progressed
tough.
in the past week. Two
Vance
reporters
is a lot
joined
more
each week
composed
to
than
talk
Trump.
about the
He's
issues,
not going
messages,
to
and
make
events driving the
the
week's
really
political
dumb
news.
mistakes.
And to take a look at the week
He's gonna
ahead,
lie, and he's
watch
lying a bunch.
C-SPAN's 2024 campaign trail. Friday
The fact that
nights at
CBS
7
is
Eastern
not,
on C-SPAN,
fact-checking
online
this
at cspan.org,
does really
or
suck.
download as a podcast on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile
Um,
app, or wherever you get your podcasts. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics.
Yeah, this is not going to be the same kind of slam dunk that the Harris-Trump debate was. I think Walls has brought up a lot of good points. He's in the right spot. But,
C-SPAN Student Camp
you know, people who
documentary
buy the
contest
lies are going to keep buying the
2025
lies.
is here.
I
This
don't
is your
think this
chance to
moves the
create a
needle
documentary that can
because I
inspire
think that the
change,
people
raise
who
awareness,
are
and
undecided
make
right
an
now
impact.
are
Your
people who are
documentary
willing to
should answer
entertain
this
Vance
year's
lying.
question. Your message to the president. What issue is most important to you
And there's
or
just no
your
way to beat
community?
that.
Whether you're passionate about politics or community stories.
If you can just
Student
make
Cam
up
is
whatever
your
position you
platform to
want,
share
say
your
whatever you
message
want,
with
and you will not be
$100,000
confronted
in
about it
prizes,
by any
including a
neutral
grand
party,
prize of $5,000.
because everybody who
Enter your
confronts them on it,
submissions
they just
today.
paint as
Scan
being
the code or
partisan.
visit studentcam.org for all
There's
the
no
details
way to
on how
actually
enter.
engage
The
with
deadline
prominent
is January
Republicans on
20th,
this stuff.
2025.
Which is why the actual answer is you just have to shuffle them out. There was an interview or something the other day.
Your window into the
I'm
nation's
forgetting who
capital.
this was.
The
I don't have
only
my phone
daily
with me.
nationally televised forum
I'll
for
have to look this up
discussing
later,
latest
and I'll put it in the
issues
Discord. It was a
Washington
really
and across the
good little
country.
clip to watch,
What I love about your show
where
is that it
a
gives
Republican,
people an
I don't
opportunity to
remember if it
speak
was a
for
senator
themselves
or
on the
a
issues that they
somebody
actually
from the
care
House
about.
Republicans.
Join us for
They're just
a
going into
live
lies, and they
3-hour
just lied and said
conversation with a
the
variety
crime
of
rate is
congressional
increasing.
members
Like they're saying the
and
drastic
Washington
crime rate
influencers.
increase. They are immediately called out for that, and they're called out. Like multiple people sitting in the interview go in to say that's
You can
not
watch
true,
Washington
and they
Journal live
emphatically
every
say
morning
it.
at
They
7 Eastern on
angrily say
C-SPAN.
it. They say
C-SPAN Now
you say this
or
all the
online
time.
at
They say
cspan.org.
Republicans have been saying this all the time. It's not true. The FBI has produced results to the contrary, and they bring up those receipts. And it was so
C-SPAN
good to
Now
watch.
is a free mobile app
Because
featuring
we
your
need to
unfiltered
normalize
view of
being
what's
angry
happening
about
in
this.
Washington.
We need to
Live and on
normalize
demand.
deplatforming
Keep up with the
Republicans
day's
when they
biggest
lie.
events with live
I think
streams of
when they
floor
lie,
proceedings
it's
and
no
hearings
longer
from
enough
US
to
Congress,
just
White House
say,
events, the
like,
courts,
fact check them,
campaigns,
and then you
and more
ask
from
them
the
why
world
they
of
lied.
politics,
They're just going to lie
all
again.
at your fingertips.
So
You
if
can
you
also
fact
stay
check a
current with the
Republican on a
latest
show, you
episodes
say
of
like,
Washington
that's
Journal,
not true.
and find scheduling
The
information
next
for
move from
C-SPAN's
that
TV
is you
networks
say,
and C-SPAN
that's not
radio,
true.
plus a variety
Then you
of
cut their
compelling
mic.
podcasts.
You end the
C-SPAN
segment,
Now is
and you
available
spend
at
the
Apple
rest of the
Store and
allotted
Google
segment
Play.
time
Scan
talking about the
QR
truth.
code to download it for free
Because if
today,
you let them
or
keep
visit our website,
gabbing,
cspan.org/C-SPAN
they just keep lying.
Now. C-SPAN Now.
You're just gonna get
Your
more of
front
it.
row seat to Washington anytime.
I don't know about y'all,
anywhere.
but I have like pizza and ice cream to help me recover after this.
The CBS News Vice Presidential Debate
They've got a
simulcast
spot
is
near
about to
me,
resume after taking a
Pizza
short break.
Twist,
This is being
that
held at
does
the CBS Broadcast
like a
Center
tikka
in New
masala
York City.
pizza. So I've got chicken tikka pizza. It's good stuff. It doesn't have tomato sauce. Oh, nice, yeah. Popcorn and cookies. I have popcorn at home. I could have made popcorn, but I was driving home from work.
Welcome back to the CBS
from the
News
Metro. I
Vice
said I don't want
Presidential
to. I don't want to
Debate.
cook
We
tonight.
want to turn now to America's gun violence
and I
epidemic.
picked up a pizza.
The leading cause of death
Gotta find
for
something else to
children
break
and
out
teens
popcorn
in
for.
America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that
that's rough.
Democrats claim would curb
I haven't been
gun
watching
violence.
TYT
You
so
oppose
much
red
because
flag
I don't like
gun
what
laws
Cenk has been
and
getting
legislation
into.
to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including
Getting into
AR-15s.
guns. I didn't
So let me
expect this to
ask
come
you,
up, actually. We
earlier
haven't
this
talked
year,
about
for
guns
the
in a long
first
time.
The parents of a
this is
school
question
shooter were
7.
convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding
Talking school
parents
shooter?
responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases, the
yeah, I don't
answer's
think it's
gonna be yes,
reasonable
and in
to
some
expect
cases,
somebody to know
answer's
the
gonna be
details on this
no.
one. This is kinda
And the
out of left
details
field.
really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's
Oh
gonna be
yeah,
different than if a parent
Trump's
hands over
like
a gun
purge
knowing that their
comments
kid is
lately
potentially dangerous.
been a big
But
deal.
look, I want to just sort of speak as a father.
Yeah,
of three
Cenk
beautiful
goes
little kids,
overboard a
and our-
lot,
our
but
oldest
lately,
is now in second
Cenk's
grade.
foreign policy has
And
been
like
really
a lot of
crazy.
parents, we send our kids to school with
And,
such hope and such joy and such pride at their little
Chink's
faces
like
on the first
reaction
day of
to what
school,
was
and we
going on
know,
with Biden as
unfortunately,
the candidate
that a lot of kids are
was
gonna
really
experience this
crazy.
terrible epidemic of
But
gun
I still
violence. And of
watch
course, our hearts go out to the
John
families that are
Iadarola
affected by this
in his
terrible stuff,
sub-segment.
and we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree
I forget
that
what
we
that
need
one's
to do better
called.
on this.
I think it's the
question is
damage
just how
report,
we actually
which is
do it.
part of TYT.
Now, here's
but
something
that's
that
the
really
part I still
bothers me
watch.
and worries me about
I'm
this
pretty done
epidemic of
with
violence.
Cenk.
The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago.
I don't think that's actually related to border guns.
What do we do to protect our kids? And I think
He says illegal guns, then he goes to border guns.
Because I don't want
That's
my kids
actually
to
a
go
non
to school
sequitur.
in a school
Which
that
is like a
feels
clever
unsafe
way to
or where there are
lie.
visible signs of security.
But
I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger.
Security.
And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea
I think that's a
that we can
real
magically
bunk
wave a
point.
wand and
Anybody
take
who
guns
knows
out of the
anything
hands of
about
bad
schools
guys,
right now
it just
would
doesn't
not
fit with recent
agree
experience.
with
So we've
that.
got to make our schools safer, and I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the
first
Second
thing,
Amendment
that's the
is
problem
there,
with school
but our
shootings.
first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In
guns,
Minnesota,
genius.
we've
It's the guns.
enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there,
talk about
it just
policies
doesn't
in
make
other
any
countries
sense.
that have
Kamala
a high
Harris,
rate of
as
gun
an Attorney
ownership.
General,
America
worked
has
on
the
this issue.
highest rate of
She
gun
knows that
ownership.
it's there.
Finland,
No
I think,
one's
is
trying
it
to
ranks
scaremonger
fairly
and say
highly.
we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools
Come on now,
to look like
hold
a
up your
fort?
thumb and find out if you'll be safe from the
Is that what
bomb.
we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids.
Just give
We
them
owe it
bulletproof
to them to get a
backpacks.
fix. These are
Oh
things
my
that shouldn't
God.
be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference.
I would
We
like for our
have to. If you're
timeline to be a
listening tonight,
little
this
brighter.
breaks your heart.
I could imagine
First
a
of all, I
darker
didn't know that your 17-year-old
timeline,
witnessed
but
the shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you saying
okay.
so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes
have a
of, because I don't think
policy
it's the
about
whole
that,
reason
though.
why we have such a bad
I
gun
don't think
violence
you do.
problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
I really
thank
like
you,
how he
Margaret.
answered that question.
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation.
When you
the
have
high
universal
cost of
public health
housing
care,
and rent.
you have that quality
There's
of
a
life,
shortage of
you're
more
not going
than
to have
4
that
million
problem.
homes in the
And that's
United
both
States, and that
violence and criminal
contributes
action
to the high
and
housing
suicidality.
prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit.
Yeah, that was
They
a
also
really
promise
great answer.
to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance.
This is actually a really good way to promote a policy on a national level to say, yeah, we've tried it on the state level in my state.
But a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien
Walz is in good shape now.
Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream dream of homeownership completely unaffordable.
Can't blame immigrants.
Now,
It's
you asked,
Harris's fault
Margaret,
for
will it
letting in
immediately
the
change
immigrants.
The equation for
That's
American
such a
citizens
weird
if you
thing
lower
to say.
energy prices, as Donald Trump says,
I keep
drill,
coming
baby,
back
drill.
to it, like,
one of the biggest drivers of housing
why would it
costs
occur
aside
to
from
you
illegal
to,
immigration is, think about it.
how do you
If a
think
truck
that gets
driver's
you
paying
out of it?
40%
What?
more for diesel, then the lumber he's
What?
delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing release,
Okay, goes to
relief
energy.
for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Energy costs
Senator Vance,
aren't
you still
really
have
like
23 seconds.
Trump
there. Do you
isn't
wanna
better for
answer
energy
where-
prices. Energy prices don't have to
Governor, we
do
will
with the
get to you in a
presidency.
moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have
I don't
a
know
lot
the
of
deets
land
on
that
this.
could
It's
be
very
used. We have a
possible that
lot of
there's federal
Americans that
land
need
that could
homes.
hold housing.
We should be
I don't know.
kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20%
That's a
of the
good
world's
point.
fresh water.
Yeah,
These
the
lands
Fed,
protect.
like,
They're there for
the
a
Fed
reason. They
doesn't
belong
really
to all of us.
retain
But again,
federal
this is when
land
you view housing
that is in
and you view these
convenient
things as
housing
commodities.
locations.
Like, there's a
I
chance
don't
to
think
make money here.
there's
Let's take
if
this
there
federal
was
land
something
and
you
let's
could
sell
do
it to
about
people
this
for
to
that.
like open
I
up
think
more
there's
housing,
better
I
ways
imagine
to
it
do
would have
this.
already been
We've
done.
seen it in
A
Minnesota
lot of the
where
land
they've
that is
refurbished some of
kept
these
by the
houses. We're able
Fed,
to make
like
some
actually
investments.
held
That
on
gets
to,
people in. And I'm still
is
on
national
the fact
parks.
on this.
It's like
Economists.
historic sites,
Senator Vance, you
places
said you don't like
where
the
the
economists.
government wants
Which
to drill for
economists are
oil
saying
or
that
where
it
they're
is immigrants
retaining
that's adding to the
like
cost?
resource
Governor, your
persons.
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to
Yeah,
clarify. There are
I don't
many
think this is
contributing
like a real
factors
thing.
to high housing costs. What evidence do you have?
I don't know
that
the details on
migrants
this. This is new to
are
me.
Part of this problem.
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime
That's
of
gonna be a
Kamala Harris.
correlation
Look,
error.
we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing
they should
everything
reply about
exactly
climate
as Kamala
change
Harris says
here.
they have to do. And what that
Well,
means is
it
you
would
have
be
a lot of
effective
people
to
who would
apply
love to
about
build
climate
homes who
change,
aren't
but
able
it's
to
not
build
the
homes.
issue, an
I actually
issue
agree
that
with
people
Tim
want to
Walz.
talk
We
about.
should get out of
The
this
reason
idea
why
of
there is
housing
such
as a
so much
commodity.
regulation about
But the
house building
thing
is
that has
obvious. You
most
need your
turned
house not
housing into a
collapse.
commodity is
You need your
giving it
house
away
not
to
catch
millions
fire in
upon millions of
California
people
because
who have no legal
we
right
have
to be here.
wildfires every
What are
year.
the
We
federal
have
regulations?
floods.
I deal with this as
Governor.
a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get through. You're passionate about the
All
housing
true,
crisis.
all very
I
true.
can
You
tell.
need a fire.
But
You
Nora?
need your house
Thank
to not
you.
burn
One
down.
of the top problems
And Congress
facing
is the one who makes these
Americans is the
decisions
high
in many
cost of
cases.
healthcare.
I don't think
Senator
Congress
Vance,
always
at the
makes those
last
decisions, because I
presidential
think
debate,
some of
former
those
President Trump was asked about replacing the
are
Affordable Care Act.
to that
In
one
response, he said,
bureau.
I have concepts
Ben
of a
Carson
plan.
was in charge of it and
Since
did a
then,
terrible
Senator,
job.
You've talked about changing
Like,
how
he didn't
chronically
know how
ill
to answer
Americans
any
get
goddamn
health
questions.
insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you
Ben
guarantee
Carson
that
gave some
Americans with
terrible, terrible
pre-existing
interviews
conditions
while he was in
won't
charge of that
pay
department.
more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of
Absolute
course,
cronyism.
we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of.
He said 900-page
prescription
bill.
drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under
stuff.
Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%.
Project 2025
Under Donald Trump's
is a
entire 4
900-page
years,
bill.
they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers.
The thing is, a lot of these so-called
and will
healthcare
also
policies
drive
under
down
Trump
costs.
are like
And we
things
talked
that Trump
about,
suggested
the
be done
reinsurance
that
regulations is
never
what I was talking about.
materialized.
Look, Donald Trump
And then
has
Biden
said
came
that
in,
if we allow
turned
states
them
to
into mandates,
experiment
and
a
they
little
actually
bit
happened.
on how to
That's
cover
what happened
both
with
the chronically
insulin.
ill,
So
the
Trump
non-chronically
suggested
ill.
an
It's not
insulin
just a
cap, and he
plan.
asked
actually
for
implemented
that
some of these
from healthcare
regulations when he
providers,
was
but
president of
it
the
was
United
never made a
States. And
requirement
I think you can make
under
a
the Trump
really good
admin.
argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump.
People
Of course,
don't-
you don't
people
have
don't
to
shop at
agree with
hospitals.
everything
It's
that
not-
President Trump has ever said
I don't think it's
or ever
reasonable to
done.
expect
But
people
when
to shop
Obamacare was
for their
crushing
health.
under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could
I
have
feel like it's the
destroyed
most
program.
soulless
Instead,
Republican
he
position
worked
of
in
all.
a bipartisan way to
It's
ensure
the idea that you should be
Americans
shopping
had
around for
access
your
to
health care.
affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that
You
Donald
can't
Trump
shop
has
when you're
earned
bleeding.
the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
Yeah,
All
total
right, here's where
gaslight.
being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the
Yeah.
Mayo Clinic, home to
Yeah.
Medical Alley.
I hate doing that
3M,
stuff. It
Medtronic,
sucks.
all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're
'Cause you
ranked
have to look
first
at it
on
and be like,
affordability and accessibility and
how
quality
much
of
shittier
healthcare.
do I want to
And
make my
so
life
what I know
on the
is
regular
under Kamala Harris,
so that I
more
will
people
not
are
be
covered than they
gouged
have before.
by
Those of
a
you
hospital?
listening, this is critical to you.
And you
Now,
have to be
Donald
searching
Trump
the
all of a
whole
sudden
time
wants to.
for, like,
Go back and remember
devious
this.
language and
He
exceptions
ran
that will
on
cause
the
you to be
first thing he
gouged
was going to do on
anyway.
day one was to repeal Obamacare.
I hate it so
On
much.
day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not
If
been
not
for the
for John
courage of
McCain.
John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma,
This
too
is
bad.
exactly
if you're
the
a
right
woman,
kind of
probably
thing to
not.
get into.
Broke your foot during football.
There's no proper
might kick you out.
response to
Your
this
kids
from
get kicked out
Vance.
when they're 26.
This is stuff
Kamala
that
Harris
Trump
negotiated
did.
drug prices
It's
for the
real.
first time
Like,
with Medicare.
what's
We
even
have
supposed to be
10
said about
drugs
it?
that will come
Trump
online,
tried to repeal
most
the
common ones
ACA
that'll be there.
with
But
no
look,
plan
This issue
back in
and when Donald Trump
2016
said,
on
I
up.
got a concept of a plan. It cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect.
We still
people
don't have
with
Medicare
pre-existing
for all
conditions
as the
or laid out that
Democratic
plan.
platform.
Look,
It's
we
such a
currently have
win.
laws and regulations in place
Back
right now
it.
that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they
anything
make a
real?
lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low.
These are different
take-home pay
instances of
was higher,
gaslighting.
and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses.
You need the
are
individual
asking
mandate to make the
pre-ACA, where we
ACA
get
work.
people out. Look,
The
people
ACA
know that they
is
need
a
to be on
policy
healthcare.
taken from
People
Republicans.
expect it to be there.
That's why it
And when
is
we are able
built
to
that
make it,
way.
and we are making
That's
it
why
this
it
way,
has an
when
individual
we
mandate,
incentivize
because the
people to be in the
Republican
market,
plan,
when we
the
help
ACA
people
was
who
based
might not
off
be able
of
to afford it get
was the
there.
idea of
And we
treating
make sure
healthcare
then,
like
when
car
you get sick and
insurance,
old, it's
which
there for you.
also
Because I hear people
sucks.
say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works.
The only way
We
for
can continue
Democrats
do
to
better.
actually
Kamala
like
Harris
win
did
on
that.
this
The
issue
way she made
is
everything
to
better
just
was
push
negotiating those
Medicare
10
for
drugs
all.
on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Yeah, it was a Romney
Hey,
plan.
can I address that?
It was based on a Romney plan, and Obama put it together like
Let's
that
talk about
to appeal to
families in
Republicans
America.
with the idea that the bill could be
There is a
bipartisan,
child
and no
care
Republican
crisis in this
was
country,
willing to
and the
entertain
United
it.
States is one of the very
Because,
few
and that was like,
developed
you know,
countries in
the start
world
of the
without a
true
national paid
ultimate
leave program
dysfunction
for new
of
parents.
the
Governor Walz,
Congress.
you
is when,
said that if Democrats win both the White House
when Mitch
and
McConnell
Congress,
came out
this
and
is a
said,
day one priority
we're not going
for
to do
you.
anything that
How long
Obama
should
wants to do because
employers
he's
be
black.
required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right
was,
now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those
Negotiable's a
companies
fine answer for
provide
that.
paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their
The
employers,
correct
we get
answer
more
for all of
consistency in that.
these,
So
if you
Kamala Harris
want
has
a
made it
benefit
priority.
to
We've
happen
implemented
for
it in Minnesota,
employees,
and we see growth.
don't
That's how
require
you become
employers to do it.
a
Just
pro-business
make the
state.
government
But the
take care of it.
negotiations on it, and here's the issue.
Yeah, the
Those
GOP
big
base is
companies
gonna be
are able
all
to
over
offer
it.
Those of
I
you
think
out there
Vance is
who
appealing
don't
to
have
his
it,
base very
just
well.
Imagine what happens if
Telling
you
a
get
lot of
cancer
lies.
or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most
He's saying
important
a lot of
people in
great
our
stuff.
lives
Like he's
to
saying
take care
a
of our
lot of good
children
stuff here. There's no
or
real
our
disagreement about
parents
it.
to get
But
paid the least
this
amount
all
of
just
money.
like
And
echoes
we
back.
have to
If
make it
you
easier
if
for
you
folks
follow this
to be able
policy
to
all the
get
way
into
up,
that
it
business
comes
and
out to
then to make
Medicare
sure
for
that
all.
folks are able
They
to pay
don't
for that. We were able
do
to
that.
do it in
It's
Minnesota,
like
and I'm still
granular
telling you
and it's
this.
broken
We
up,
were listed
and
as
there's
the
all
best
this
state. We're
focus
still in
on like
crisis on
means
this.
testing
A federal
stuff,
program of paid
and it
family
makes
medical leave and
Medicare
help with this
so
will enhance our
annoying
workforce,
to
enhance our
engage with.
families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Don't
Yeah, well, first of
mandate
all, Margaret, a number of
employers
my
to do
Republican
it.
colleagues and some
Give
Democrats
money
too
from the
have worked on
government.
this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution here
Checks.
because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult.
This is turning
and
into a
it's not
Dodge.
just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure
But do you support
on
it nationally?
young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would
Okay,
like to
so
go back to work immediately.
sounds like it's a good
Some would like
policy.
to
Do you
spend a little
support it?
time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look,
How
if you
so?
look at the federal programs that we
Well,
have
what's Donald
that
Trump's
support
approach? It's
paid family
nonsense.
leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area
okay.
or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable.
I don't think it's a
Of
problem
course, Sam
if
and I have been on the campaign trail a
childcare
lot the past 7 or 8
can
weeks.
be
and
delivered
one of the biggest
through
complaints I
a
hear from young
religious
families
affiliation
is
group or a
people
religious-
who
a
feel
religious
like
group.
they don't have options.
So long
like
as
they're
we're not
choosing
talking about
between
school
going to
choice.
work or
School
taking care
choice is
for
a
their
whole nother
kids.
issue there.
That is an incredible burden
But
to put on American
if it's just
families. We're the
childcare and
only
you want it to
country
be
that
handled
does it. I
through
think we
a
could do
religious
heck of a
org,
lot
I think
better.
that's fine.
Senator,
I don't
thank
like it,
you.
but it's
You
fine.
have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American
Delivering
family.
childcare is
The
more
Federal
important to
Reserve
me
says
than whether or
parents
not the
will
kids are
spend
being
nearly as
brainwashed.
much on childcare as they do on
Unfortunately,
housing
kids
each
being
month.
brainwashed is just normal.
So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care
Good on the
shortages, we
moderator.
just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American
this is where he's
families.
going to.
Because the reason it's so expensive right
His
now
answer
is
is,
because you've got
let
way
churches
too
do it.
few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised?
His proper
that
answer to this is
realistic?
if you make them Democrats.
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and making less. So not only do they not get the money,
so
pay for that,
he's
they're
accurately saying
$4,000
that
in the
what
hole. That's world school.
Vance
That's
is
that's
talking
his alma
about
mater. And so I think the issue
penalizing
here is,
foreign countries.
if those
It's
members
tariffs.
of Congress,
That's not what
I
tariffs
can't
do.
believe they're not. When I go to
A tariff does not
businesses, sure, they'll talk about
penalize
taxes
China.
sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans.
Yes, there's
after
not
the
really a way to
economy
make Congress
and
go along with it
inflation.
other than
After the
they have
2020
to get voted
election,
out.
President Trump's campaign and others filed 62
Question, Lee.
lawsuits contesting the results.
Oh, on the big lie.
Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud.
How does Vance
The
answer
governors
this?
of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election
Ooh,
results
yeah, maybe.
and sent a
That's a good
legal
question.
slate of electors to
Misogyny
Congress
has really
for
been on the up.
January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you
Because it
again
is.
seek to challenge this year's election results, even
Let's
if
be clear,
every
Vance should be in jail.
governor certifies
Like, honestly.
the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it.
Do you?
Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala
this
Harris
answer's so
and
fucked.
Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat
This is the kind of
censorship.
answers they're
It's
allowed to give on
Americans
these questions
casting
because
aside
Merrick Garland has
lifelong
not done his
friendships
job.
because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies
Dems
silencing their fellow
absolutely
citizens,
dragged their
and
feet
it's
about
Kamala
this.
Harris saying
They should have
that
been
rather than
clapping
debate
people in
and persuade
irons.
her fellow Americans,
They
she'd like
allowed
to censor people
Jim
who
Jordan to
engage in
dodge a
misinformation.
subpoena for,
I think
like,
that is a much bigger
multiple
threat to
years
democracy
now.
than anything that we've
I
seen
think Jim
in this
Jordan was
country
subpoenaed
in the
in
last 4 years, in the
2001.
last 40 years.
Didn't
Now, I'm really
testify
proud,
ever.
especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar
They should have
Democrats,
arrested him.
to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard,
actually detain
lifelong
him.
leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have
is
to agree on
unimportant.
every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle.
Okay, so
that we
what's
ought to
Walz
debate our
gonna say about
differences.
this?
We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade
How
our
does
fellow
Walz
Americans. Kamala
dig into
Harris
this
is engaged in
accurately?
censorship at an
I
industrial
don't even know if they're going to
scale.
give
She
Walz
did it
a
during
reply
COVID.
on this.
She's
They
done
might
it over a
give him a
number of
different
other
question.
issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten
This
at
is
the
a
Capitol
good
that
rehearsed
day.
setup.
Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box,
There
shaking
is a
hands
problem
when we
here
lose,
in that
being honest
Tim
about
Walz
it,
cannot
but to
say
deny what happened
what legitimately
on
needs to
January
happen,
6th, the
which is
first time
a
in
lot of
American
people related to
history.
January 6th
A
should have been
president
arrested.
Or anyone.
A lot of people
tried
in
to
Congress should have been
overturn
arrested.
A fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And
But
here we are,
Democrats
4 years
balk
later,
on saying
in the
that.
same boat. I
There's
will tell
no
you this,
replacement
that
for
when this
that.
is
There's no
over,
other
we
way
need
of
to shake
addressing
hands
it.
this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to
You
stop.
need to
It's tearing our
jail
country
them.
apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
But
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all,
like
it's
the
really
Democrats are
rich
worried that it's
for
not viable to
Democratic
say
leaders
it.
to say
The
that
Democrats
Donald
have
Trump is a
criticized
unique threat
Donald
to
Trump
democracy
for
when he
saying lock her up,
peacefully
so they
gave
don't
over
want to
power on
be
January
hypocritical
the
about
20th,
this.
as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country,
We can't
Democrats
trust this.
protested the results
Vance
of
is not
elections.
the decision
Hillary
maker on
Clinton
this.
in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect
Yeah,
the
we've
results
heard
of the
that
election,
before.
I'm
It's
on
not the
board.
same.
But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor?
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this.
Yeah.
It has massive repercussions.
That's
this
true.
idea
Yeah,
that there's
Trump didn't-
censorship to stop
That's a good
people from
callback.
doing-
Oh,
threatening
yeah.
to kill someone, threatening to do something.
That
That's
would have
not-
been a
that's
great
not
mention.
Censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to.
There's so much to
thank
talk
Senator
about
Vance.
regarding what the
I think
Republicans
this
have
is the
done.
conversation
Like
they
the
want
amount
to
of
hear.
malfeasance is
And I
beyond
think
what
there's
you
a
can
lot of
mention
agreement.
in a
This
debate.
is one that we are miles apart
It's
on.
hard.
This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying.
Because the
he
problems
didn't lose the
pile up
election. I would
faster
just
than
have to-
anything can
did
be
he lose
solved.
the 2020
Because
election?
problems keep piling up
I'm
when you don't
focused
arrest
on
people.
the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is
Has she tried
that is a damning non-answer.
Has she? It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy
Yeah,
is the
'cause they don't
First
believe in
Amendment.
democracy.
You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present
I didn't
political
hear what
moment.
Walz said
I would
about
like
threats and
Democrats
hate
and
speech.
Republicans to both reject
It was a
censorship.
call on something
Let's
important.
persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the governor
masks.
does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to
Please.
respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look,
Yeah.
when Mike
I don't run
Pence
Facebook is a
made that
correct answer.
decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on the
That
stage.
face. Yeah, the
what I'm
faces.
concerned about is
Yep.
where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including
It's a good
taking
note.
an election, and his vice
Which
president's not gonna
candidate
stand
said
to it?
he would
That's
be
what
a
we're asking you,
dictator on
America.
day one?
Will you
Can
stand
you
up?
point
Will you keep your
on the
oath of
stage
office, even if
the side
president
that said
doesn't?
they would
And
be
I
a
think Kamala Harris
dictator?
would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that. Because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
Yeah, this should be the news break before the closing remarks. So, yeah, the Republican issues run so deep, there is no way to, hit them all. You can't do it. It's impossible. Which is such a tall order. And this problem
House will be in
exists
order?
and it's exacerbated
This year,
because there has
C-SPAN
been this,
celebrates 45
like
years
this
of
last
covering Congress
4-year
like no
period
other.
of not
Since
dealing with the
1979, we've
problem.
been your primary
It's
source
festering,
for Capitol Hill,
and we're dealing with it,
providing
and
balanced,
we're
unfiltered
faced with this
coverage of government,
challenge now
taking you to where the
because it's
policies
taken
debated
so
and
long
decided,
to
all
try
with
and
the
bring
support
any
of
number of
America's
people to
cable
justice.
companies.
And I think that
C-SPAN, 45
the
years and
start of
counting,
that for me
powered by
is
cable.
like, you didn't put anybody up on oath, really.
Friday night.
You didn't force you didn't force Jim Jordan to
A
testify.
weekly discussion on how
Jim
the
Jordan should have gone to
presidential,
jail.
Senate, and House campaigns have progressed in the past week.
There
Two
are
reporters
people
join
who I
each week to
believe
talk
are
about
indicted for the
issues,
false
messages,
elector
and
scheme.
events
I don't
driving
think
the
they've
week's
gone to
political
jail yet.
news, and to take a look at the
But the
week
false
ahead.
elector scheme
Watch
doesn't have on its
C-SPAN's
own.
2024
Rudy Giuliani's not in
campaign
jail.
trail. Friday nights at 7
I don't
Eastern on
think
C-SPAN,
that
online at
Eastman
cspan.org,
went to prison.
or download as
Eastman
a
should be in
podcast
prison.
on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's her face?
C-SPAN,
Kraken
your
lawyer.
unfiltered view
Kraken
of
lawyer
politics.
lady should possibly be in jail. They put her on trial, and she just admitted that all the lawsuits were bullshit.
Attention, middle and high school
Like,
students.
absolutely.
It's time to make
But
your
everybody
voice
who
heard.
was involved in
C-SPAN
the
Student
false
Cam
elector scheme
Documentary
should be in
Contest
prison.
2025 is here.
Right now.
This
And
is
Donald
your
Trump
chance
is
to create a
unmistakably
documentary
involved in
that can
that scheme.
inspire change,
In
raise
prison.
awareness, and
It's
make
obvious.
an impact. Your documentary should answer this
But,
year's question. Your message to the president.
This
What
this
issue
like
is
immunity
most
thing
important
coming
to
in from
you
the Supreme
or your
Court,
community,
causing more
whether you're
delays and more
passionate about
cases.
politics or
The
community
documents
stories.
case is
Student
something that
Cam
happened
is your
even
platform
after
to
January
share your
6th.
message with $100,000 in prizes, including a grand prize of $5,000. Enter your submissions
the Jack
today.
Smith
Scan the
investigation's
code
running into
or
all
visit
these delays.
studentcam.org for all the details on
Years
how to
and
enter.
years of
The
delays.
deadline
This is
is
how long it
January
takes our
20th,
justice system to work.
2025.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that that's the tack that they take. Is yes, this is. I mean, this has been the
Start your
Republican
day
stance
with
for
Washington
like
Journal, your window
more
into the
than
nation's
5 years,
capital. The
at
only
least.
daily
Is
nationally televised
the First
forum
Amendment
for
defends the
discussing
right to
latest
lie.
issues in
That is a
Washington
definitive
and across the
Republican
country.
point.
What I love about your
And it's
show
the worst
is
thing
that
about our
it
country.
gives the people an opportunity to speak for themselves on the issues that they actually care about.
Join us for a
I do
live
not think that
3-hour
anybody should
conversation
have
with a
like.
variety
I
of
think there are
congressional members
circumstances where people
and
should not
Washington
have the right to
influencers.
lie.
I love this show. This is my favorite show to do
Yep.
of all shows because I actually get to hear what the
Yeah,
American people,
Vance will absolutely
care
uphold that
about.
it is his right
You can
to
watch
spread that
Washington
kind of
Journal
lie.
live every
And
morning
he's
at 7
he's
Eastern
doing
on
that
C-SPAN.
actively. He's done that
C-SPAN
recently.
Now, or online.
That's fresh.
at cspan.org.
And that should be actionable. Now, charges have been pressed, but it's not clear if anything's actually going to happen. And if they win the election, then it's certain
C-SPAN
nothing's going to
Now
happen.
is a free
Because the
mobile
amount of time
app
it would
featuring
take
your unfiltered
to
view
get
of what's
justice
happening in
for
Washington,
people in
live
Springfield
and on demand.
for the real
Keep
harm
up
that they
with the day's
faced,
biggest
because
events
these
with
people had to
live
have the
streams of
police
floor
defending their
proceedings
kids at
and hearings
school.
from the U.S. Congress, White House events,
The amount
the
of time it
courts,
will take for them to
campaigns,
actually
and
get
more
justice
from
for
the world
those
of politics,
real harms
all at your fingertips.
could be as
You
much
can
as a
also stay
decade.
current with the latest episodes of Washington
The amount of time
Journal
it took
and find scheduling
to
information for C-SPAN's
hold
TV networks
Alex
and
Jones
C-SPAN
accountable
Radio, plus
for
a
the
variety
Sandy
of
Hook
compelling
bullshit.
podcasts. C-SPAN Now is available at the Apple Store and Google Play.
It was insane.
Scan the QR code to download
I don't
it
remember
for
when
free
Sandy
today,
Hook
or visit our
shootings.
website,
I don't remember when the Sandy Hook
cspan.org
shootings were.
C-SPAN Now.
But it was like
C-SPAN Now.
22,
Your front row seat to
23
Washington, anytime,
when they actually
anywhere.
like held him accountable and passed the finished the sentencing on him, said like,
And
no, you
now
got to pay
back
people
to
billions of
CBS
dollars.
Broadcast Center in New York City for the final
value of
minutes
a human
tonight's
life
live simulcast of the CBS
In terms of
News
all of like the
live
struggles and
presidential
things,
debate.
all the mental health issues, the cost that is incurred from the loss of one human life is something like $20 million.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. It is
Yeah.
now time for the
Still
closing
dodging.
statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and
So
elected
if
to go
you
last. So
have
Governor
to
Walz,
pay
you are first. You have 2 minutes.
More than $1 billion.
Thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS
That is
News.
like
and most
killing-
importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still
That's
up
like
and
killing
the folks
100
who
people.
miss Dancing with Our Stars, I
Like,
appreciate it. But look,
at the
the
least.
support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything.
I don't expect
but
much
they
from
are
closing remarks
truly
here.
optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not
Yeah,
the freedom
I
of
wish they
government
wouldn't
to be in your
mention Dick
bedroom or
Cheney.
exam room, but the freedom
They
for
shouldn't
you to
bring
make
him up.
choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as
Because
Maya
it's
Angelou
one thing
said,
to not
believe it when he
reject
told you that. His
the
first inaugural
endorsement,
address
it's
talked
another
about
thing to mention
American
it.
carnage.
I don't
And
think
then he
anybody
sport-
has the burden of
spent 4
rejecting
years trying to maybe do
the
that.
endorsement,
Senator
but
Vance
mentioning
tonight
the endorsement
made it
doesn't
clear
look good.
he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the
It's a
heart of
powerful
that.
line.
All the
Good
while
quote from
asking
Vance.
everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new
Yeah.
day where everybody gets
I
that
don't think it's worth it to
opportunity
move
and
to the
everybody
center
gets
on
a chance
almost
to
any
thrive.
issue.
I humbly ask
I
for
think
your
the
vote
answer in
on
all
November 5th
cases
for
is
Kamala Harris.
Governor
hold to
Walz,
the left,
thank you.
turn out
Senator
Gen
Vance,
Z as
your
much as
closing
you can.
statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz.
Feel like that's the winning strategy.
You folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight.
So,
and I believe, as a person who wants to be
like,
your next vice
when I think about
president,
energy,
that
the
we are
first
a
thing I think
rich
about
and
is people freezing to
prosperous
death in
enough country
Texas.
Where every American, whether they're
That's
rich
what I think
or
about.
poor, ought to be
And
able
I
to
think,
turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night.
Trying to
That's
remember the
gotten more
name
difficult
of their
thanks to
governor
Kamala
over there. It's
Harris's
not
energy
Paxton.
policies.
Paxton's their
I
AG.
believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford
forget.
a nice meal
That guy
for
should
your
be in jail.
family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to
It's
be
an
able to
absolute
afford to buy a
malfeasance
house.
to
You
allow
ought to be
people
able
to
to
freeze
live
to death in
safe
your state
neighborhoods.
while
You ought to
energy
not have
companies
your
gouge.
communities
Abbott,
flooded with
that's it.
fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's
Yeah, I
policies.
think Abbott should be gone.
Now, I've been in politics
Absolutely.
long enough to do
To the
what
sun.
Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one she's going to work
You
on
let
all
people
these
freeze, you
challenges
burn.
I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day
going back
one
to the
was
she's been president
1,400
argument.
days ago, and
It's
her
very clear
policies
that
have
this
made
is the
these
only point
problems
they
worse.
have to
Now, I
offer
believe that we
is
have the most
she's been
beautiful
president,
country
these
in the
problems
world.
weren't
I meet
fixed.
people on the campaign
Or she's been
trail
vice
who
president,
can't
these problems
afford
weren't fixed.
food,
You know, Donald
but
Trump
have
was
the
president,
grace
and he didn't
and
fix these problems.
generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have
Just to
the
the void.
greatest country,
You
the
let
most
people freeze,
beautiful
we launch you to
country,
the void.
the most
I
incredible
think it's more
people anywhere
salient
in
to
the world.
suggest that people be
But
launched
they're
into
not
the
going to
sun.
be able to achieve their
You know,
full
I have
dreams
great
with the
hope
broken leadership
for
that we have in
Elon's
Washington.
Mars
They're not going to be able to live
colonization.
their American
It
dream
gives me
if
the
we
hope
do the same
that
thing
we
that
could
we've been
send
doing for the
Elon
last
Musk
3.5 years.
to Mars,
We need change.
far away
we need
from
a new direction.
us.
We need a president who has already done this once
Wouldn't
before
that be
and
nice?
did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you.
Vance was a lot more human than I was expecting. He did a very good job of hiding his foolishness.
I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35
But Walz
days
showed
until
himself
Election
as
Day.
being like the
Please get out
personable,
and vote.
ordinary
And for all
kind
of
of
us
dude
here at CBS News,
who's
thank
rightly
you and
exasperated.
good night.
I think honestly both of these people had a pretty good showing. There's the handshake at the end. And I think Vance here today, despite being a horrible, scummy, terrible human being, showcased that he's a better human being than Donald Trump. So, yeah. And Walz did a lot of things to make this debate a referendum on Donald Trump. The election's a referendum on Donald Trump. That's a lot to be said about it. Walz harped on a lot of the comments that Vance had made about Donald Trump in the past. Correct? Yeah. Walz is either he is at least a better pretender at being human. The thing is, though, Trump is so inhuman. Trump is incapable of ever saying the words, "I was wrong." So just by being able to say those words, Vance is actually a better human being than Donald Trump. I think I think Vance is more closely connected
Handshakes
to
all
like
around
insidious
between the
masters,
candidates, their
but
spouses, and the moderators at tonight's
he's able
first
to
and
say
only
I was
vice
wrong,
presidential
which
debate
Donald Trump is
hosted by
physically
CBS.
unable to do.
The first
But yes, it's the
square-off
lowest
between
bar I
Minnesota
could imagine.
Governor Tim Walz
The
and
bar's in
Ohio
hell,
Senator J.D.
which is
Vance,
consequentially
now
where these guys
in the
belong.
history
So,
books. The two
you know,
vying for the
easy
second
there.
highest office in the land exchanged ideas on several topics, ranging from
I thank you
the
guys for
conflict in the Middle
entertaining
East,
my
the
rampant
economy,
partisanship.
and the
It's kind of the only
banned
way I can get through
immigration.
this.
Moderators Nora
Yes,
O'Donnell
he's
and
physically
Margaret Brennan
capable of shaking
pressing the
hands.
candidates both on multiple topics.
And I gotta give him
Now
that.
a live
He is
look
able
from
to do
C-SPAN
that.
Cameras on the ground in New York City, inside the spin room, where we are anticipating reaction from surrogates
Oh, that
for the
video
Trump
is
Vance
so
and
bad.
Harris Walz campaigns, each expected to explain why their candidates outperformed the other. We'll be bringing you all the highlights from there for the next hour.
How does Minnesota
We, of course,
rate?
want to have a conversation with all of you as well. Your reaction to tonight's debate. If you're supporting the Harris-Walz ticket, dial in at 202-748-8920.
22. Looks like 22 is the latest data.
The Trump Vance ticket,
Minnesota.
dial in at 202-748-8921. If you're voting
I
for
want the
another
rankings.
candidate, different one, dial in at 202-748-8922. If you don't want to
Okay,
call,
that's the
you can text
rate
at
per thousand.
202-748-8903.
How does that rate versus other states? How does it rank?
Tonight over on C-SPAN 2, we
death.
are going to be simulcasting with one of our cable affiliates the Spectrum News post-debate coverage. They're going to have analysis
down here?
and reporters from across the country over
get
on
out here.
C-SPAN
Nice
2.
sort.
Here, a conversation with all of you.
Okay.
And let's hear from David, who's in Los Angeles, Democratic caller.
Lowest in
David,
New Hampshire.
your reaction
1,
to
2,
the debate.
3, 4, 5. Minnesota ranks fifth.
I thought it was
Fifth lowest
pretty good for a vice presidential
teen birth rate.
debate.
Tied
I was
with New
very
Jersey.
surprised.
That's a
Yes,
pretty
I'm
good
gonna
statistic.
vote
There
for
are 50
Walz.
states. Going fifth is pretty
I
good.
do want to make it clear when I saw at the
What
end that
state is Vance the
was
senator
talking
for?
about Donald Trump's achievements. It seems that they
I
seem
don't
to
actually
forget
remember.
the year 2021.
He is from Ohio. Oh man,
And
he's right
it
alongside
just
Jim
goes by the
Jordan.
wayside. It gets-
Ohio really
you know,
brings out
I
the
think
worst.
that the idea of
Where
all
does
the stuff that
Ohio rate?
happened during COVID.
Okay.
is
Ohio's not in the worst
being-
brackets.
being, gaslighted to the American public.
David, what surprised you? You said you were surprised by this debate.
Both of them spoke extremely eloquently, as much as I'm not really
Caller
a big
from
fan
California?
of J.D. Vance, but Walz in particular
Yeah.
had his
Yes, he's
stuff
cover.
down.
He's lying about his
He
own
answered
state.
questions in a way that didn't seem rushed. He didn't seem what's the word I'm looking for?
I'm gonna grab a little pizza. We'll reflect on some of these callers that are calling
I
in.
do know that
We can
Vance
chitter
did
chatter.
appear to be, like Trump, a bit peeved when something was brought up that didn't go along with their agenda. They pushed back with, alternative, what I would call the Kellyanne alternative facts. But, I'll give him credit for a lot of stuff that he has tried to stand up for, even though he's flip-flopped a lot. You're talking about a man who called Donald Trump American Hitler, which is really, really
Yeah, Vance is a big flip-flopper.
shocking when you think
This is a
about where
great
he's at
place.
right now.
I haven't
All right,
reheated
David,
this.
so
Let me see if I
ask
can
you
get
this.
it on
What grade
camera.
would you give each of the
This is,
candidates tonight for their debate performance?
Might be a little hard to see. This is good stuff. It's got
Honestly,
like
I'll give Walz,
masala
I'll
sauce,
give him
red onions,
probably
mushrooms,
an A-, because I'll
the
never give
chicken,
anybody an A+.
and green
I'll
cilantro
give
and green chilies.
J.D. Vance a C at the best. I think he did average.
Oh,
He
wait.
tried.
Is
but
that what that
I think he was outmatched for sure. He
It's
just did
25
not
points. I think that's
realize
25 out of
that
1,000
This
is what that
school
means.
teacher and
If I was reading the stats right.
from Minnesota was
I
going
believe
to
it was
run
25
rampant over.
per 1,000.
All right, David's thoughts
Yeah,
there
it's
on
number
how
of births
these
per
candidates perform.
1,000
Let's go into the
female
spin room
per
in New York
1,000
City.
teenagers.
Colorado Governor
So,
Jared Polis talking
as a
to
percentage
reporters.
point, that means 2.6%.
So there's no one there
in
to stand up
Mississippi.
to Donald Trump's worst instincts. and potentially a threat to our democracy itself. Tim Walz brought that home on issues that matter to the American people.
That's how bad it
saving
is
people money
in
on
some parts
groceries,
of the country.
on costs, on healthcare, on housing.
It's
on
the
issue after
Bible Belt
issue.
states
Tim Walz put out his detailed
that
plans
do
with
the
Kamala
worst.
Harris. J.D. Vance tried to
Mississippi,
imitate those
Arkansas,
plans.
Louisiana,
He didn't really speak to
Kentucky,
his boss.
Oklahoma,
Any of that stuff is
Tennessee,
not what Donald Trump
Alabama, Texas, and in Texas, the maternal mortality is pretty bad.
He was for the Tiananmen Square massacre. Do you
Yeah,
think
the
that book is
absolute
closed,
worst
or-
are mostly Bible Belt. Georgia's ahead above the rest of the Bible Belt, looks like.
You know, if he got the month off
pull
by
up
a
the
minute,
Texas
I mean, do
stats.
any of us know
I
exactly where
wanted
we
to
were in a
check,
particular month in 1998. He was in Hong Kong. It was
Texas,
around the time, whether it was a week or two later.
okay,
I
so
think
we've got
that, what it's
infant
really
mortality
about
rate.
is the plan for the future. And
Let's look
obviously,
at
this is somebody who's a deep experiences, whether we're serving in the U.S. Army.
Okay, this
Reserves,
is from
whether it was being a
22.
coach, being a teacher,
So our understanding
serving,
is that
in the
Texas
United
is
States
has
Congress
gotten
for 12
markedly
years, or as a
worse.
governor for 6.5
But Texas
years.
is clearly
He's
not
ready day one
in
to
the
stand
worst.
alongside Kamala
The
Harris
worst,
as a governing partner to move our
Mississippi.
country forward.
Mississippi's pretty bad. Looks like we've got a problem in the Rust Belt. Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia. Although I think the Rust Belt is largely considered to be
Governor
this
Jared
like
Polis, there in the
Pennsylvania
spin
through
room in New
Illinois
York
bracket
City.
here.
You heard him getting asked about
Well, it's bad
the
in
Minnesota
Delaware.
governor's response to a question
Ugh.
from the moderators about his previous comments about Tiananmen Square and where he was at the time. Tim Alberta, who writes for The Atlantic, his take on
Where's Minnesota
the
on this?
governor's
Minnesota's
answer
down
during
here.
the debate, a malpractice that Walz
But
didn't
I
have a
know
sharp,
that
succinct
Texas
answer
had a
to
swing
the Tiananmen
here.
Square question ready to go, is what Tim Alberta says about that response. We want to get your take on the debate tonight. Let's
what was
go
the
to,
decision after Dobbs?
Maxwell in Ohio, Republican.
Hello.
Hi, Maxwell. How do you think the candidates did?
Oh, was this actually a 2021
I think they both did pretty
thing?
well, but I got to say I was more leaning towards Vance's side.
And why?
I think he was more well-spoken and attacked the questions at hand more thoroughly.
Following the
What did
state's
you like
21
about
ban
the
on
way
abortion
he
care,
delivered his
far
responses
outpacing
tonight?
a slower rise in maternal mortality
I think it was
across the
clear,
nation.
concise, and
From
straight to the
2019 to
point, and
22,
pretty
the
level-headed.
rate of maternal mortality rose by
And,
56% compared to
For the most
11%
part, wasn't willing
nationwide.
to just fully defend everything that Trump said, had his own takes on everything.
And you appreciated that? You liked that? Or do you
So this
think
guy
he should have been
appreciated that
more
Vance
full-throated support for the
didn't
former
go
president?
along with Donald Trump.
I like that he's his own man in the sense of the debate, you know, in the sense of American politics.
Okay, Maxwell's there in Ohio, Republican. Back into the spin room, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly in support of the Harris-Walz ticket.
Have come down. They're going to come down more under Project 2025. That's going to go away.
Abortion is considered a winning issue for Democrats usually. Do you think that Walz delivered tonight? Do you think he hit the home run that he needed to hit?
100%. I think he hit the grand slam on that issue. Made it perfectly
I'm gonna reheat this a
clear
little bit.
to the American people.
It's good.
Where
It's
Donald
fine
Trump
cold,
and
better
J.D.
hot.
Vance stand, and that is they do not stand with American women. And it is putting women at risk. There are women dying across our country. Governor Walz mentioned one of them in Georgia, who has died because Donald Trump took away the right of a woman to make this decision between her and her doctor.
I feel like
Senator, was the governor's answer
I feel
on
like
China good enough?
the mortality rate in Texas should be front page.
About whether he was actually there in 1989 during the
So you're talking about, I think the question is, was it June or August or July in 1989?
The report from CNN.
That question was so stupid and random.
So you're talking about a month 35 years ago?
Yeah, you're talking about a month
So,
35 years ago.
And it's like, which month was he there? I don't think the American people care about that.
Senator, who won this debate?
Based. Yeah, I don't think anybody should give a fuck.
Because he has a vision, and he articulated that vision in
The issue of the
plain
Alliance
spoken
Times-Herald
language,
dated May 16,
compared to
1909, features a
JD,
photo of Walz
who is a
touring a
Yale-trained,
Nebraska National Guard
microphone,
storeroom.
for Donald
Walz will
Trump,
take over the job of
who
staffing
talked to
the Alliance
I think
Nebraska.
he was somewhat transparent about some
So-
of the things that are in Project 2025.
But does that mean that the photo was
the issue of
taken?
abortion? It's
Oh,
clear
wait,
that
wait,
they're
wait.
not
Is it so? The photo's
Donald
in
Trump and
May.
J.D. Vance
When was
are not
Tiananmen?
sticking
I
up
don't
for
know when the
American
Tiananmen
women.
Square thing was.
And their
I was born in
literally,
'89.
You know, their lives
I
are at
am
risk. We've seen a
35.
woman in Georgia
I was
die
born in
because
September
Donald Trump broke Roe v. Wade.
'89.
He claimed
This is
himself.
before my birth.
He put in Supreme Court justices with a specific plan to take this fundamental right away from women.
Am I the median voter yet?
I think it was pretty
Am I
obvious.
the median voter age?
In the debate
No.
tonight.
Not sure.
You know, who is going to stand with American women and who doesn't really care about their health care.
Senator, can you talk to me about preparations of Maricopa?
Senator Mark Kelly there. You heard him say that he believes it was the Minnesota governor who won tonight's debate. We are getting your thoughts on who won. Gray in Denton, Texas, independent. What do you say?
All right, independent from Texas. Let's see what we get.
Hi, this is Ray. I definitely think that from watching what
All right, caller, we're going to move on. Phil in Queens, Democratic caller. Hi, Phil.
Drop.
Hi, yes, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I worked for McGovern. I worked for Jimmy Carter, turned 100. I worked for Ramsey Clark, Mo Udall. Over the years, I became more conservative, but I still, even local liberals, I vote for, I work for and with. But this debate, CBS did not ask questions about so many issues that are really at stake here, and
Critical of
including
CBS.
crime, including more on the economy, and quite frankly, I was surprised at how well.
That's right. They didn't
Governor
ask a
Walz
crime
did.
question.
He's much smarter than Vice President Harris, but I thought that Vance really showed he's a very vibrant, brilliant young man who has total control of the issues. He should have refuted Project 29. That has nothing to do with President Trump. It's
this guy is.
it's a distraction. And Walz didn't lie as much as VP Harris did in her debate, but I actually thought this was a credit to Walz and Vance. I thought that the hosts were they didn't fact check after.
I don't know where that guy was coming from. All right. Yeah, I need to resume this. You can't just do C-SPAN out of nowhere. Okay. So that's going on into the recording. How do I get back to live C-SPAN? Full event, featured clip, post-debate coverage. Here we go.
On Israel, and they brought that up right off the bat. We've got some sound about how both candidates responded.
But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute
That's just gonna hit.
fundamental.
We already know what happened there, so I was maybe more interested in the callers. Here we are.
For the good, and I think Trump would be the good. So thank you so much for giving me so much time. God bless America.
Okay, Phil there in Queens. Richard in Alexandria,
Okay,
Virginia,
so
Republican.
Phil in Queens
Richard.
ultimately is for Trump. Claimed to be a
Hey,
Democrat.
how you doing today? I thought Vance was very impressive. I mean, from the opening minute, from the
I've heard
opening
this caller
second,
before.
taking
I know this
control,
name, Richard,
giving
Virginia,
an
I
introduction
think.
to himself, which I thought CBS dropped the ball there. No one knows these people. No one knows who these candidates are until.
So the funny thing is,
recently, and he just took control.
I
He
feel
showed
like
he
I've
was
heard
very-
this
he was
caller before.
prepared.
I don't
He
know
was
if I've heard
concise,
him
like another
calling
caller
into
said, on point.
C-SPAN or the
I like how
Majority
he
Report.
fact-checked
'Cause
the
I think this
commentators.
might
I
be a
thought
guy
was
that
kind
was
of,
getting like
interesting, but
schooled
yeah,
by
Vance, one caller
Sam Cedar
gave him
the
a
other
C.
week.
I think he got an A in my opinion, and Walz a C because I felt like Walz stuttered a little bit. Maybe he was shell shocked from the questions or the bright lights or whatever. But yeah, Vance really impressed me, and I'm happy to see him be the second in command there.
Richard, what did you think? What did you think when the
I think this is
moderators
pretty
cut
even.
the
I don't
mics?
think this swings the polls, but
Yeah, that was
this
that
helps
has to
distract
happen.
people from Trump.
Sometimes they can get into each other a little bit, as far as debates go. They showed a little bit of control. I like that, but like the previous caller,
That can only
they
help
missed a
the
lot of
Republicans
questions.
being distracted from Trump.
Just same questions over
I'm still
and
recording.
over again.
I'm going to cut the recording.
About abortion.
this is the point
and about,
where we'll cut off
you know,
what
and,
gets uploaded to
Walt
YouTube.
dropped the ball with the China question. Like, I don't know.
Thank you
like, he
all,
refused to
YouTubers,
answer
for
that.
tuning
Like,
in.
That just proves his guilt.
This has been
almost. Like,
Jupiter Exile.
What are you hiding?
I
What
hope
do
we
you don't
wander
wanna
again
tell us?
soon.
Like, I just thought that was embarrassing.
If you've got
I hope the
more
people see
political
that
content
and, you
that
know,
you'd
what
like
else
me to
could
take a
come
look
after
at,
that, you know?
please
Richard,
post
your
in the
reaction
comments.
to Andrew
I'd love to do
Desiderio,
more
who
political
covers
discussions.
Capitol Hill.
We'll be hitting those
Wow,
on the
Vance
stream
just said
on
Americans don't
Mondays and
trust
Tuesdays
Republicans
throughout the month,
on abortion.
interspersing
He said
that with
Republicans have to
work
earn
streams
back
where I'll
the
be editing
trust
my
of the
other
American
videos.
people on this. Were you surprised at